So first to start, right? What is an honors program, right? Some of you may be familiar with this and some of you may not be. And for just the ease of the presentation, I'm going to be referring to these as honors programs, even though they may go by many different names. And so that explanation there right at the top, right? So it's a rigorous academic experience for select high achieving students that spans the course of the undergraduate degree, right? So that first part, most programs have it. It's an enriched program or an enhanced program, right? So that may include some more rigorous coursework. And then, typically it is for the most high achieving students. And how do you define that is the question, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation, but most folks understand that like the students who are your highest achieving students in the application process typically are the ones that are going to be most set up well for success in an honors program. The services that come with an honors program, right, can include a lot, right? So it can be housing options, so they could live together as a cohort, right? Where you're seeing a lot of residence halls now do this, where they're kind of grouping students by interest, right? So different types of affinity housing. You could also have honors housing, right? So you have a small cohort that are living together. Mentoring, right? They could have additional mentorship to help support their success. Scholarships, and for some honors programs, that might be it. It might just be an honors scholarship, right? With no additional programming. There could be study abroad honors programs that are only available to honors students. And then, of course priority registration, right? So if you're not familiar with how course registration works in the US, typically the way that it works is seniors have first choice, then juniors, sophomores, and then first year students, right? And that's because your seniors need to graduate on time and they need to take those courses. So you could think about a situation where, let's say you have two sophomores and one's in an honors program and the other isn't, and they have priority registration. That student who's part of that honors program could get that priority registration over that other student. Typically, right, applicants, you apply to an honors program, but they can also be selected for a program. And so that is something that you will want to be aware of with your students in the process. You may, it might be a question right in the application saying, do you wish to be considered for an honors program? There might be an additional writing prompt. Some other institutions, you might be a high flyer in the application process and selected for an honors program. So that might be a nice surprise in the admissions process. And then importantly, these programs, they can be found at institutions of all shapes and sizes, right? So they can be found at your large public flagship institutions. They can be found at your smaller liberal arts type colleges, private colleges, public universities. And the way that they kind of use them is going to be different depending on the institution and the size. So honors programs, they're not new, right? But they can feel new. So some of the first honors programs actually came out after World War II, right, with the GI Bill. So that's where, veterans had access to higher education and they could go get a college education. My grandfather took advantage of it. He was in the Korean War, came back, right, to the United States, went to Boston University. So it really opened the door for a lot of students. And so I believe the first one was in 1956, 1957. That looks like the current iteration of what it is today. But really, you start to see a lot of the honors programs ramp up from 1990 onwards, where you have about 60% of them that were established by 1994. So 60% of the ones that are, current iterations have been kind of put in place over the last 30 years. So a lot of institutions are now doing this. And so that was something that was surprising to me in doing a lot of this research, right? To see, oh, like there's a ton of honors programs out there. My experience on the road here, and this is that third bullet point down, is I have seen more people kind of ask questions about honors programs, honors colleges when I'm either doing, high school visits or college fairs, right? And there are some expectations of having something like this in some markets, right? Because when you think of higher education, it is to a degree like a market, right? There's people who are looking for different college experiences, looking for different shapes and sizes. They have different wants and needs in terms of what they want out of that experience. So some folks are really dialed in and they might say, do you have an honors program, right? And it's good for us to be able to say, yeah, we do have an honors program, right? And so for that student who is looking for that kind of highly rigorous kind of prestige offering, that is a benefit to them, right? That's an additional tool that we have in our tool belt. And another important thing as well that I'd like to talk about kind of briefly as well is, and this is where you can help a lot of your students, is explaining what these honors programs and all our honors colleges are all about, right? Is it helps build some of that cultural capital, right? So there are folks who know about these programs, but there's certainly a lot of folks who don't know, right? And those are the students that I really want to talk to, is the ones that don't know that this is out there, but they could be eligible for it and really succeed, right? And so, building up that cultural and social capital to help those students succeed and understand that this is something they can do. And then I've also talked a little bit about the many naming conventions, right? So you'll see them listed as honors programs, honors colleges, honors experience. I found an honors institute as one of them when I was researching these. And then there might be some where they just have like you confer honors, right, up with your major. And so that could still be an honors type program. And so now we got to ask ourselves, why do honors programs exist, right? Because you wouldn't be kind of wrong to say, well, isn't every college experience supposed to be highly rigorous and enhanced and challenge you to think? And yes, that is the case, right? I like to think of honors programs as like an additional layer on top of that, right? So the student is going to do well in college, but they really want to be challenged a little bit more. And they can exist for different reasons, and every institution's different. But broadly, what you'll get in terms of benefits, right, is that top one there. It creates smaller cohorts within larger universities. So if you think about an institution that has, let's say, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 students, right, where you might have a lecture hall that's going to have 200-300 students in class. That's not a situation where I would excel personally, right? But you might have a student who is accepted into an honors college within that larger research university where they can take advantage of having smaller class sizes, more attention from the faculty. And so some larger institutions, it's a way for them to practice kind of the smaller liberal arts approach while still having access to the broader resources of that large R1 research university. So that is something that they can do, right? So if you think about Clark, we have a 9-to-1 student faculty ratio, regardless of an honors program or not. Not every college, not every big university can do that. But if you're a big university and you have an honors cohort, you might be able to do that, right? And that could be a benefit for the student who wants to have the best of both worlds there. Another one is, it can signal an increased prestige with the academic experience. So I talked a little bit about that with some different markets, right? To be able to say, yeah, we have an honors program, right? And this is something that is special that only a certain set of unique students can take advantage of. So for students who are interested in prestige, that can be incredibly important, right? It's also important for return on value, right? I like to talk about that with the increasing cost of higher education in the United States, right? I think we had our first institution surpass $100,000 a year, all in tuition, room and board, right? And so how can you help that family understand that, yeah, this is worth it, right? And so some folks could be using an honors program to kind of help set up that, that additional return on value. And another thing with that as well is, especially in the Northeast, right, where Clark is from, we're experiencing a demographic cliff. This is something that people are always talking about, right? So in Korea is probably uniquely or acutely aware, right, of the birth rate of kids, right? So low birth rate, the lowest birth rate in the world. The Northeast has a decreasing birth rate as well. So with that, there's projected decrease in available high school students in going to college. And so a lot of institutions are going to feel the crunch because they're going to say, okay, well, where are our students, right? Where we don't have enough students to kind of fit the spots. And so how do we compete? Another thing you could potentially do is have an honors program, right? That becomes another thing that becomes advantageous for your institution. Of course, it's going to help with leadership skills, right? It's going to help you in terms of collaborating. So if you're working with small groups, working on some some interesting problems. And then finally down at the bottom, it can work out with your outcomes, right, for graduation, right? It looks good on a grad school application. It can look good in terms of your professional outcome if you're applying for jobs. So a lot of benefits there, both, and in terms of why they exist, they're multifaceted and they're going to be different for every institution. Now, the benefits, I've already kind of talked about this a little bit, but you can see the honor specific scholarships. There's going to be community building through cohorts, right? So if you're having that group of students who all are really excited to get after it and get into a rigorous academic experience, they're going to be together, right? Specific housing for honor student, that's another benefit. We talked about access to honor specific courses, closer faculty connections, priority registration. There can be additional research opportunities or additional research funding available for students. In some cases, there's study abroad experiences specifically for honor students. Honors graduation, and of course, I also said it shows well on applications. So we're in Massachusetts, Clark University, right? But there's a ton of universities in Massachusetts. And so I took two screenshots here of two institutions, a private and a public university. So Boston University there on the left-hand side, and UMass Amherst, our largest public flagship in state, right? And you might not be able to kind of read all the words on the screen on the blurbs there, so I wrote it down real quick. But intimate class sizes, right? Communal atmosphere, tight-knit community, close ties with faculty, right? So these are two large institutions where they're able to bring in a smaller kind of tight-knit community, right? So this already comes with a lot of like liberal arts colleges that are small in size, but now students can take advantage of an excellent institution like Boston University or UMass Amherst and have that more personalized experience. Another unique thing about Massachusetts specifically is that we have the Commonwealth Honors Program. So the Commonwealth Honors Program, Massachusetts is the only state in the country to offer an integrated network of honors programs across all their public colleges and universities, right? So all the in-state publics, part of that Commonwealth Honors Program. So, tax dollars have backed that in providing this, this more rigorous experience that students can really take advantage of. And then, of course, right here on the right, this is some sample private higher education institutions that have a version of an honors program just in Massachusetts, right? And this is not an exhaustive list. This is me doing a Google search, right? So I just did a Google search, honors programs, Massachusetts. I'm sure there's a lot more out there, but I just wanted to put that out there just to show. And I think Massachusetts is a pretty unique example because we're pretty densely populated with the colleges and universities, right? That there's a lot of places out there that have a version of this. So in terms of selecting students, right? So you might be saying, okay, yep, I understand an honors program. I understand the benefits, but how do institutions kind of look at this, right? And that's going to differ for every institution. But, I would say, and I feel pretty confident, well, first of all, sorry, selecting students, yes. Selection differs, but yeah, academics is a primary driver, right? And so, as I said, if you're kind of looking around, if you have students that you're advising and they're just telling you, hey, I want to apply to this institution, maybe see if they have an honors program, right? So if you're looking up, I don't know, like SUNY Geneseo, right? And you want to see if they have an honors program, type in SUNY Geneseo, honors program, see if they have it. They might have an additional kind of essay prompt. So just think about this as doing an extra piece of advising in your work with your students, because some of them you have to apply to, some of them you might be selected for, right? Applicants, right? The academics is a driver, as I said. And so, yes, that could be a high GPA, that could be test scores, it could be essays, it could be counselor recommendations, right? The club's activity section, all of that goes into the holistic application review process. What does that look like for each institution is going to differ, right? But if you have that student who is doing really well academically, that they're probably set up pretty well there in terms of next steps. Typically, if you are admitted to an honors program, you'll find out at the time of admission, right? So that way you have your admit letter in hand, have your financial aid in hand, and you have your honors program acceptance there, right? And so you may have to click yes, like I accept this. Just make sure you're looking at that fine print there. And then again, as I talked about, selection can be a yield tool, right? So that's why it might be released at the time of admission. So you can weigh out, okay, I was admitted to this program, but not in an honors program. And I was admitted to this one, but maybe it's not my first choice, but it's an honors program. I'm going to have a smaller cohort. You need to kind of weigh out like the benefits. Like, is that something that is going to pull you away from that other institution potentially? And so that segues perfectly into this next slide, right? So when working with your students, right, first and foremost, encourage them to apply, right? Click yes if prompted, do that additional essay prompt, right? Do a little bit of research about the institution to figure, even if it's not necessarily your top choice, like, do some research and say like, here is why. Advise them as well that they can have a unique academic experience, right? Because it truly can be a unique academic experience. They can have, personalized attention at a larger institution that they might not normally get. They're going to have that smaller cohort so they can do some great community building. And then last, it can be a more rigorous experience at an institution that might not be their first choice. And that's okay, right? We understand everyone kind of looks at US News college rankings, right? Whether you put stock into them or not, some students, that is kind of where they start their college search, right? But you could potentially have a great experience at an institution that, might not be your first choice, but they're going to have a great honors experience. And then lastly, I said at the bottom here, like updates to the academic experience, regardless of whether it's an honors program or not. That's always a good sign, right? It's a good sign that the institution's kind of working on that student experience. They're working towards providing that like heightened experience that students are looking for. And so an excellent resource if you want to kind of start looking at a lot of honors programs, and this is not the exhaustive list, but this is a good place to start, is the National Collegiate Honors Council. And so this is an organization that has 900 plus colleges or universities that have some form of an honors program, honors college, honors experience, right? It's gonna look different for every institution. And, a lot of the resources are for paid membership on that. But you can look by state and see every kind of institution that's part of this organization that then has an honors program, right? Or an honors experience. So then from there, you can do a little bit of searching. So if let's say a student says, hey, I'm looking to go to college in California, and this is kind of what I'm looking for, then maybe you could go to California on here, kind of see the institutions that have it, dial in, come back to them with some research and say, hey, did you think about applying to this place? This place has an honors program. That could be exactly what you're looking for.